Now in part 3, what we'll do is take a look at using the various smart sheets for teaching writing in terms of the emerging literacy types of writing. And in the Common Core Standard, there are 4 major writing categories. One is text types and purposes, production and distribution of writing, research to build and present knowledge, and range of writing. And so each of those has a series of subcategories, like under text type and purposes, you have expressing opinions, expository writing, and narrative. Under production and distribution, editing and revising is a big part of that, and publishing. And under researching to build and present knowledge, you have researching and presenting, and then range of writing, you have short time frame writing, and then of course more extended time frame writing, and then writing for different disciplines, like writing for science or writing about history and that sort of thing. There are quite a few resources on the Make Sense Strategies toolkit that you can use for addressing these standards. So what we'll do is we're going to begin by focusing on the writing tools for emerging composition writing. And there's a specific area on the Make Sense that are really designed for emerging kinds of literacy. And that's under the writing categories levels 1 and 2. And so to begin with, click on level 1, and that will open up this page. And as you can see, there's a series of 4 of these smart sheets, 1A to 1B, 1C, and so forth. And these are progressive in the sense that students begin with this one, and then once they can do that, they move on to this one, and then this one, etc. So these are sort of developmentally sequenced. So this first one is very simple, and it's really more about categorizing than anything. And so what you do is you start with a topic like playing in the snow, and then you think of words that are related to the topic, and you draw a picture, and that's it. Okay. Now, one of the things you can do with students is, of course, do this with them in sort of the traditional language experience. But then after you've identified these various words, have students use the smart sheet to then talk about the topic by using these as prompts for what to talk about. So you're basically having them practice using the smart visual as an organizer for expressing ideas about the topic, but not necessarily doing it in writing yet. We'll get to that a little bit later down the road. Once they can do that, then we'll move on to this next one, which is slightly more sophisticated. So here you'll have a topic, and then words related to the topic, and there are just 2 places for that. And then we're going to do something with this little middle area here in terms of organizing ideas, and then we're going to convert those words to sentences. Here's how it looks. So let's say the topic is my dog Zoe. One of the words is spots, and he digs. And so we're going to think about, if you're going to talk about how Zoe has spots and he digs, which of these would you write about first? Well, I think I'm going to write about how he has spots first, and then how he digs. So I'm basically organizing the ideas or prioritizing which to write about first. So Zoe has lots of spots. She likes to dig holes. And then there's little prompts here like, did you capitalize the first letter, and did you punctuate the end? And then draw a picture. So basically, organizing ideas, deciding what order, then turning those ideas into sentences is what this is about. Once they can do that, we're going to jump up to something a little more sophisticated. And now we're teaching a strategy called PLAN. And PLAN stands for preview words to use, list the actual ideas you want to talk about in your writing, assign order, and then note those ideas in complete sentences. So under preview words to use, this is like just brainstorming a list of related words, any words you can think of that are related to your topic. Now you may end up using or not using some of these words in your writing. More often than not, you end up doing that. But this is sort of to get started. These are more specific ideas that you want to address in your writing. So here's an example of how that looks. Topic is Marley and Ernie. Brainstorming a list of words that I might use when I'm writing about Marley and Ernie is that they're cats and they're fuzzy and they have whiskers and so forth. The key ideas I want to talk about is that they're my pets and what they look like and what they do and what they eat. Then I'm going to assign order. Now notice, in this case, I'm going to talk about how they're my pets and then what they look like. And then I'm going to talk about what they eat. And last, I'm going to talk about what they do. That's because the ideas you think of and the order you think of them in isn't always the best order to write about them in. So we're brainstorming what to write about, and then we're deciding what's the best order to address them. Last, we're going to note those ideas in complete sentences. So we're taking these words or this idea, and then we're turning that idea into sentences that address that idea. What often happens is students often end up then using many of these words in these sentences. Here's another example. Toby the fat weenie dog. And so preview words to use, the actual ideas I want to talk about, the order, and the ideas converted to sentences. Once students can do that, then we move on to something even more advanced. And we're going to add a sub-strategy to the one that we've been learning. Okay, now the one we've been learning was the plans writing strategy. Preview words to use, list ideas, assign order, note ideas. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add an S to plan. And so now it's plans by adding state a conclusion at the bottom. And up here we have a sub-strategy called path. What's your purpose? Who's your audience? What's your topic? And what's your hook? Now, hook is something you're going to say early in your writing to kind of hook the reader to make them write some more. So here's an example of how that looks. In this case, the purpose, I have two choices. I can either tell a story or write about something. My audience is Granny. Topic is birthday party. Hook, have you ever really been surprised? So preview words to use that I might use when I'm writing. What are the ideas that I actually want to be sure and write about? And what's the order that I'm going to write about them in? So in this case, I'm going to start talking about the pizza trick, and then how my best friends came and how there were lots of presents, and then write about the pizza and the ice cream and the cake and so forth, and finally about the clown video. And then I'm going to add an idea about the conclusion and then convert these into sentences. And so what you get is a pretty well organized paragraph as a result of using that to plan your writing. Now, there are a lot of instructional resources in addition to these basic smart sheets that you can also access. So for an example, if you click on Guide, what will open up is a series of written instructions or teacher's guide for how to use these. And if you want to get back, then be sure to click on Menu. And likewise, there's a rubric that you can click on, and that opens up a rubric you can use that's associated with this level. There's also a lesson plan that you can use. And so basically what the lesson plan is, you may have different groups of students that are really on different levels. So for a particular group, what's the smart sheet you're going to use? What skills do you need to review or reteach? In terms of what level of learning are you addressing? Are you just introducing it? Or are you practicing to develop accuracy using it? Or are you practicing it to develop fluency, which is to use it quickly? Or are you working on generalization, which is basically how to apply that writing graphic to different contexts and situations? Also, what level of scaffolding are you planning on doing for this group, like an I do it, which is I'm going to model it for this, or we do it, we're going to construct it together. Y'all do it is where cooperative groups are using the smart sheets to plan their writing, and then they individually use it to write it, or you do it, meaning the student's doing it by themselves. And for that group, are you going to need any accommodations? So it's a pretty simple, straight up type of lesson planner. Likewise, there's a record sheet that you can use, because in your class, you're going to have different students that will progress with these at different levels. And so as the student masters each one of those developmentally sequenced smart sheets, you may have some that are still working on 1 or 1B, whereas you may have another one who's up on 1C or 1D. And this basically allows you to differentiate instruction based on where the students are progressing as they're developing their use of the increasingly more sophisticated smart visuals. Once students have basically worked their way through level 1, then you can go on to level 2. So you click on that, and what opens up is this. Now, what we're going to do is basically pick up right where level 1 ended, but now the focus is on using it for writing narrative compositions and subsequently descriptive compositions. So for an example, if I click on the narrative, what we're going to do is, this is very similar to the last one, only it's been tweaked just a little bit more. Since it's narrative, first of all, under purpose, you have 4 choices. You're either going to describe something, you're going to tell a story, you're going to explain something as an expository, or you're going to persuade. Okay, and so since it's narrative, we're going to tell some kind of story or sequence. So an example of that is preview words to use, the ideas, sign order, note ideas, and so forth. Now, you'll notice that there are two of these. Let me go back to this. There's two in A, level 2, narrative A, and then two in B. And so two in A, notice that it has these basic prompts like who, what, when, and where. And that's really helps the students structure and things of different things they need to address when they're writing their narrative. This is an example of two in B where you don't have the prompts. And here's an example of what that looks like. Now, there are a number of organizer smart sheets you can also use for emerging composition writing. We've been focusing on level 1 and level 2 under the writing, but there are also a number of these more generic organizer smart visuals that will be very useful to you. And so for simple opinion writing, for an example, you might want to take a look at the hierarchic one main idea smart sheets. So if you click on that, this will open up, and just an example of one of many that you can use for that. We can take this basic generic graphic organizer, and so for an example, what's the name of a character, and then different things you liked or didn't like about that character. And so it's a very simple way of using a hierarchic for persuasive writing. Likewise, as students get a little more sophisticated, then you can move on to two main ideas. For an example, name of a character, and what's your opinion, you liked him or didn't like him, and then what are reasons and supporting points for why you liked the character or didn't like the character, and so forth. There are also some tools on the Make Sense toolkit for editing and revising and providing peers with students with feedback about their writing. So if you go back to the writing part, under level 2 or any of the levels, there's something called the scope editing strategy. So if you click on scope, scope basically stands for spelling, capitalization, omissions, punctuation, and ear. So basically under spelling, look carefully at each word to make sure it's spelled correctly. If you're unsure, ask someone or look at it. Oh, wait a second. I see the word spelled is misspelled, so I need to edit that and fix it. Under capitalization, capitalize the first letter of every sentence, capitalize all proper, got a capitalization error there. Omissions, watch out for words accidentally left of students, got a word left out. Punctuation, the end of every sentence has a punctuation mark. Use commas for things in a series. Use commas following coordinating conjunctions and dependent clauses. And if you're unsure, ask someone. Left off my punctuation. Under ear, read your lesson, your essay out loud. Listen for making sense sentences that don't make and correct them. Oh, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. Listen for sentences that don't make sense and correct them. Listen for sentences that are awkward because they're worded strangely and too many words written to say what you want to say and refine them. Wow, that's pretty awkward. How about just listen for awkward sounding sentences and refine them? Listen for mismatches in use of singulars and plural. Got a problem there. Listen for switches in verb tense and corrected them. So this is kind of a fun way of kind of presenting the scope editing strategy. But the key thing is that by providing students with this editing strategy and then modeling and providing guided practice on how to use this, it's a way of structuring and organizing the basic steps to editing. So also the K3 writing standards address the whole area of researching and presenting, and there are a number of tools from the Make Sense that can help you with that. It's under the category of project-based learning strategies. So for an example, under planning projects, and you have a topic analysis matrix where you identify different topics that you might do research on, and then you code these based on how interesting they are to yourself, like very low or very high. And then you interview other people about the topics to see how interested they are in it. You check out the availability of information. Can you find anything on it? Or some other category that you might want to list. And then you give those scores and total them up, and whichever has the highest scores, what you do a topic on. So what your research on. So it's really teaching decision making when you use a tool like this. This is a strategy for planning the the unfolding of the project. So for an example, you use this with teams of students. And so what they do is they determine the tasks, what are all the things we need to do, reveal the resources. For this task, what are some things that we can do that'll help us get this done? And this might be internet, they might be human resources like people to interview, they might be artifacts that somebody can get access to, and so forth. Then for this task, assign duties. Who does what by when? And for this task, forecast barriers. If we run into this problem, then target solutions, then we'll solve it by. So what we're doing is we're having kids determine the tasks, resources, and the duties, but we're also having them be proactive in terms of thinking about, now when I'm doing this, what's a problem we might run into? And if we have that problem, what are we going to do? So we're teaching also how to, not only how to plan, but also to be proactive in terms of problem solving. This is an example of another one of the smart visuals from, or smart sheets from the project-based learning section of Make Sense. And these are looking at different ways of communicating the ideas that they want to present on. In other words, it's not always just a paragraph or an essay. They can do things like developing graphic organizers, or doing things like using photographs or creating posters or a collage. They can create various 3D visual devices like making a model or collecting artifacts, or have various written types of documents. They can do various performances like dramatize an event, or actually videotape a real interview and that sort of thing. And so the idea here is we have students identify, now what's the key idea we want to communicate it, and what would be a cool way of getting that idea across. This is an example of a goal setting sheet that can be used. And this is where, this first one, our goals for working together effectively. So of course with project-based learning, one of the sub-skills that you're almost always working on is how to collaborate more effectively. And so what we have the teams do is take a look at these goals and check the ones that they want to reflect their goals. And so what I ask students to do is to pick 3. Don't check up all of them, just pick the 3 that you think are the most important that will be your goals. So for example, listening without interrupting, or turn taking, or encouraging and complimenting others, or giving iMessages, or whatever. The second section are goals for using effective work techniques like keeping timelines, being creative and open-minded, being accurate, engaging in challenging tasks, etc. And finally, this last one are commitments to quality project presentation. And so what we're actually doing here is we're having each student on the team sign off on the goal sheet indicating that, yeah, they agree that this is going to be one of their goals. So once they've checked off 3 goals from here and 3 goals from there, then I use this as a basis for reviewing periodically how are you doing with your 3 goals, and even score or grade part of their project outcome based on how well they address the 3 goals that they targeted.